Hey guys, I'm going to do a quick video today. I'm not going to talk about the updates in the news because there's meetings going on right now. There's a lot of stuff with the legalese. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's not much I can add this moment outside of just seeing just watching the chaos unfold. Um, Mainstream media is obviously not covering stuff. The independent media is covering stuff that's happening, but it's actually there's so much stuff. There's so much corruption and foul play that it's actually overwhelming and kind of impossible to try to process the whole thing. I don't think there's any one person who knows everything that's going on, and that includes the attorneys, because they're all pursuing stuff from different angles. Um, so I'm not going to talk about that. What I am going to talk about, however, is some food for thought for moderates, new viewers, people who feel politically displaced, people who are on the left, people who, you know, they see the stuff unfolding and they're not really sure what to make of what's happening. Or perhaps they're being outraged as they take the mainstream media's line on whatever it is, and they're angry. So, what I'm going to talk to specifically here are you guys who are gamers. I fall into that category too. I love video games, always have. And one of the experiences you have as a gamer growing up, it's not as bad now as it used to be. But when video games became super, super mainstream and it was the talk of the town, we had to deal with people like Jack Thompson, Tipper Gore, Hillary Clinton, even various right wing Christian groups. And the media, they would come out and they would speak out against video games, and they would claim it's a murder simulator and every crazy thing you've ever heard. It's simulated sex. Like, that was the one that Fox News ran a segment on, and they actually really just had a debate between two people who like had no one of them had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. But the fact Fox platformed them was silly because they don't know either. They're just like, oh, we're told this happens. They're not playing the game. They don't know. So when you watch that from really any source, including modern game journalists, let's be honest, like Kotaku and whatnot, you start getting really enraged. You start to get really angry, and you go, how do these people know this, or don't know this rather? How do they how do they get off writing articles and doing segments on games they haven't played with information that they cannot confirm? That's just basically whispered down the lane of whatever the complaint is. And you see these people are completely clueless about video games, video game culture, consoles, ratings, content, and in general, you don't want to be judged. You just would rather they just leave it alone, because there's not any role for the mainstream news to start coming after video games. It's been much better handled internally. Despite the Gamergate stuff and all that, it's still video games very much running on their own is far better than having outside forces who don't play video games get involved. And we know this. And what shocks me is that gamers who are my age, or a little younger or a little older, who end up lapping up stuff that the media says about other topics. Because we lived through the prime example of basically the media covering a subject and being completely dishonest at worst and being completely ignorant at best, and completely spinning things and skewing things. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they just have bad data. Oh, this firm says this, and then the developer says this. Well, this firm never played the game, but the news people, they don't know. They have no idea. They're kind of normies, and that has improved a little bit, especially as younger people have gotten into the news media. The punching bag is no longer video games. It still occasionally comes up every time there's some sort of multiple homicide. They always talk about games, and it's silly. We know it's not connected, but people insist that, and we should know that these people are not trustworthy. They're just looking for. They're looking to have conversations about things that they simply do not understand, to get the eyeballs on it, to drive the outrage, to drive the ratings. But for some reason, the same gamers who know and have seen this happen in the media, how their hobby's been slandered, how they've been slandered as gamers, still take at face value what those same sources say about politics, international affairs, whatever it is. You guys just you know, you'll read the article, you'll nod your head like this debunks this proves this, this is true, this isn't true. And you guys get a lot of your opinions and a lot of your facts to comfort you in your opinions from these same sources that you know have gotten things really wrong, if not flat out lied to you about something that you know intimately. For instance, video games. People who are in the military know this. You know, they read an article and they roll their eyes. They're like, yeah, that's not how this works. It's when they read an article about something in the military, usually they're appalled, and you go, okay, well, they served, so they know. And it's the same thing with when they tell you about what somebody else thinks, about what they tell you when an event happens, whose fault it was, what actually occurred. You notice how they very rarely link the raw video anymore. They just usually have just a anonymous source said this, and then the anonymous source is from another anonymous source. We would never tolerate that level of dishonesty and deceit if it was something we intimately knew, like video games. But when it's politics or something about the president or something that comforts your political thoughts, you guys seem to just lap it up. And I'm disappointed, to the very least, because some of the smartest people I know eat up the MSM lie, thinking that it's edgy. They dunk on the conservatives, and they really don't know. They don't even know what the conservative stance is, let alone the facts they have are gathered from the same sources that lied to you guys about your own hobby that you knew intimately. I'm not saying you should shut out all media. You know, you're not. You have to be able to take in information. But you got to take things very, very cautiously. If they're all saying one thing is true, listen to the voices that are saying it's not, and find the evidence for yourself. An article citing an anonymous source is not evidence, you know. But an affidavit that's signed with a confession, that is evidence. We have to be able to distinguish these things. And for whatever reason, it seems like the major parts of the community, some of the smartest people I know, some of the nicest people I know too, they just absolutely lap up the stuff the mainstream media says. You know, they say, well, I don't like the look of Trump, or I don't like his attitude, so I'm going to believe whatever negative article comes along. And when somebody says, no, that's not true, or that's not how we feel, or that's not the case, you guys say, well, look at this article that said it. I'm surprised these people don't remember having these engagements about video games in the same manner, where your mom says she's not getting you Mass Effect, and you're like, why? This is when you're 13. Well, because it's simulated sex, and then you have to say, no, that's not the case. Yes, it is. I saw it on the news. You guys remember that argument? That's what it's like talking to a lot of people now, especially if you're on the right. And you're talking about things like the election corruption, or just any subject in general. It seems like the same people who would absolutely crucify that same media for doing things that they did for video games, and talking about subjects that they understand intimately that the news people do not understand at all. But then they'll use those same people to assume, oh, well, they must be experts on voter fraud, or they must be experts on the economics, or whatever it is. And it's the same people, guys. So don't, again, it's not always malicious, but I don't understand why there's not more skeptical people out there of when the media are all pushing one narrative. That should raise some flags for you guys. Because we went through that with the game stuff. And really, the only reason the regulation didn't come down the pipe is because basically the people in charge couldn't agree on what to do. And then by the time it came to be, basically the people who were playing the games became old enough to be the voting adults. Right? Because they understood them. And that's where that stuff, it became unpopular enough because basically 18-year-olds got the right to vote, and they were not going to be voting for anybody who was going to be regulating video games. right? But that's why that went away. But in terms of foreign policy, election stuff, general politics, you guys don't seem to approach it with the same amount of skepticism that you would if they were doing a report on games. So that's some food for thought. I don't have a solution. I'm not saying that you should, become a news junkie and dig all this stuff in. But what I am saying is that you guys need to hear out people who you disagree with, particularly if your disagreement is rooted in information you're getting from sources that all push the same direction. These people, the media people, they're going to lie to you. They want that rage bait. They want the clicks. They want the headlines. They want the vitriol. If they bring on an expert who is lying, and they have no way to know whether they're lying because they're they're clueless as to what's going on. They're just a bunch of talking heads in a newsroom. And they bring on this expert who says something absolutely outrageous. And then they bring on the other person who maybe knows the truth or maybe says something outrageous in the other direction. That fight that occurs, that's usually that's so they can get the attention. If they can say something that's ridiculous and draw the ire of one side, that'll draw the admiration of the other side. When really they don't know what the hell they're talking about, not in the slightest. They didn't understand video games. They don't understand politics. They don't understand foreign policy. They don't understand a lot of these things, There isn't much actual journalism left, guys. And I find it just disturbing that the same people who were pushing the games cause violence nonsense, the games rot your brain, all these, like, coming after your hobby, something you care about and know intimately, and you rejected them flat out when there was those type of attacks. But when other attacks about subjects you don't really know that well, that they're now attacking somebody else on, and you're getting your information from them, you are totally okay with using their ammo and using their arguments and using their sources to present your case as to why you don't like, Trump or Trump voters or whatever. Maybe it could be the other way too, Could be something like marijuana. There's not really good media coverage on that, I think the verdict's still out, and I've heard a lot of doctors talk, and I've heard a lot of advocates, and I find it a very interesting discussion. But you know where I don't go? I don't go to CNN or Fox News for their bullshit articles to decide what my stance is on that. And I try not to assume that it's malicious from either side, because just because someone agrees with me or disagrees with me on a topic, I don't try to assume it's malicious. But you guys, it's tough, because it's like, I don't know how many more ways I can say this. If you know that they get something wrong this bad on a topic like video games, which is completely inconsequential in terms of the grand macro of things. Yes, it's important for free speech, yes. But in terms of, do you think these people are invested in video games? Do you think of these people who believe this, their kids are playing video games? No, of course not. They're distant from it. But they'll lie about that. You think they won't lie about things that will strongly affect the public's perception, that can strongly affect and shape national and international events? You think that power that they have, they're going to just throw that away because they're not using it against video games? Of course not, guys. Of course not. So that's all I'm saying it 5 different ways, but I just want you guys to stop and think about that for a little while and just think, why do I trust these people? Why do I take at face value what they're saying, and why do I ignore what my opponents say? Why do I hold CNN any more credible than a place like InfoWars or the Washington Post over the Wall Street Journal, right? Remember when they lied about the YouTube stuff, right? You guys remember that. And you guys just assume they're not lying on these other things that are much more consequential. We really have to, I think, particularly my generation, and particularly the generation coming up, has to go in understanding that these people lie. It is their job to lie. And they lie by omission. They lie by not knowing what they're talking about and just repeating what's on the teleprompter. And they lie by Sometimes it's just blatant. Sometimes they just bring some expert on who doesn't actually know what the hell they're talking about. But they're an expert. They got the degree. They got the little blue check next to them. So then that's the person they bring in, and they could be completely wrong. I mean, Jack Thompson, we all know and hate that guy. Is he considered? Is he an expert that they brought on about this video games and violence in video games? Why, yes, he qualifies as an expert. We all know the guy's completely full of crap. He's got some sort of ulterior motive going on, or he's just crazy and enjoys the attention. And we know the things he says are usually completely wrong. But he's hailed as an expert. And why you guys would accept experts from these same people who selected somebody like Jack Thompson to speak on behalf of video game subjects, you believe them for domestic foreign policy election stuff about the president, about whoever. You guys just assume that they're telling the truth this time. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And I want to encourage you guys to, at the very least, when you see somebody who disagrees with you, it's not because they haven't seen what you've seen in the mainstream media. It's because they've seen other stuff, and they're also approached the mainstream media with the skepticism that it is needed to be approached with. And you guys who are, assuming the worst, particularly when some kind of quote is taken out of context, or you say something's happening behind the scenes and it's not, or foreign policy, or this is going to happen domestically, you guys just seem to lap it up and parrot it back when you know the people who did that for the video game talking points back in the day, you wanted to punch them in the throat. They were infuriating. In fact, they were perpetuating the problem and the misunderstandings. And if you do the same thing and you just parrot what the media is saying without questioning it at all, and you do that for long enough, you're going to damage your own knowledge, because you're not actually going to know what's going on, and you're going to just damage society as a whole, because you're going to create tension that otherwise would not be there. And that's all, guys. Just a little bit of food for thought for a Monday evening, and I'm waiting for more stuff to drop the rest of this week. We'll see. Hopefully it's good stuff. And here's hoping.